They thought they were being taken to die. The truck doors slammed open, and the women braced for chains, shouting, punishment. But instead, they saw sunlight, horses, and the enemy offering them water. What happened next would change everything they believed about war. Stay till the end. This story will shock you. It was 1945. The war was over, but for these German women, the battle had just begun. Captured, defeated, and sent across the ocean, they thought America would break them. But what happened next broke everything they believed in. The war had ended, but peace hadn't come yet, not for them. Europe lay in ruins, shattered cities, broken glass, and faces that had forgotten how to smile. Among the wreckage, a quiet order spread. The prisoners would be sent away. Some were soldiers, others civilians, and among them were women who had served, worked, or simply lived in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were herded to the rail stations, carrying nothing but small bags, a few photographs, and the kind of silence only defeat can create. No one told them where they were going, only that it was far, and that the flag flying above their destination wasn't theirs. When the train doors slammed shut, the sound echoed like a verdict. For hours, they sat in the dark, listening to the rhythm of wheels against the tracks, hearts pounding louder than the engine itself. One woman clutched a small cross. Another held a picture of her brother who never came back from the front. Someone whispered, "They say the Americans are sending us to labor camps, across the ocean." And the whisper spread like smoke, thin, uncertain, terrifying. Outside, the landscape rolled by, burned-out towns, empty fields, graves marked only by helmets. They were leaving behind a country that had promised glory and delivered only ashes. But ahead, no one knew. Days later, they reached the coast. The sea stretched endlessly before them, grey, cold, merciless. A ship waited at the dock, huge and silent. To them, it didn't look like rescue. It looked like exile. American soldiers stood by the gangway, tall, unreadable faces under foreign uniforms. Their orders were clear, but their eyes, not cruel. Still, the women couldn't trust that. Not yet. As they boarded, the smell of salt mixed with oil and fear. Metal floors creaked beneath their boots. Some women prayed softly in German. Others just stared at the horizon, trying not to cry. For many, this was their first time seeing the ocean, and perhaps their last time seeing home. The voyage began. Days turned into nights. Nights into a blur of seasickness, hunger, and anxiety. The ocean felt endless, and so did the uncertainty. They huddled together on the deck when they were allowed out, watching seagulls fade into the distance. Each mile carried them farther from the ruins of Europe and deeper into a silence they didn't understand. Sometimes they caught glimpses of the Americans who guarded them, laughing softly, smoking, writing letters. They didn't look like monsters. They didn't even look angry. That somehow was even more unsettling. One evening, a storm hit. Waves crashed against the hull. Thunder rolled across the sea. In the dark, one of the women screamed, "I knew it! They'll let us drown!" But then, a flashlight beam cut through the rain. An American soldier was there, shouting, orders, guiding them below deck, helping them find safety. No cruelty, no punishment, just calm direction. When the storm passed, something strange happened. They thanked him. A German woman thanking an American guard. No one had words for that. As the ship neared land, a new kind of fear took hold. They could see the coastline. Wide, green, peaceful. America, the land of their enemy. One whispered, "They say the camps are worse than prisons." Another replied, "At least it's not the Soviets." No one laughed. Then came the orders. Prepare to disembark. The ship slowed. The anchor dropped. Boots clanged against metal stairs as they lined up to go ashore. Every step felt heavier, than the last. They expected shouting. They expected rifles. They expected revenge. But when they reached the docks, they found silence. American officers waited, clipboard in hand, calm, almost polite. There were no cages, no barking dogs, no hatred in their eyes. One soldier offered water. Another pointed toward the trucks, not roughly, not yelling, just giving directions. And the women looked at each other, confused. Was this really the enemy? The drive inland was quiet. Through the truck's open slats, they saw fields of cotton, tall trees, blue skies, children playing by the roadside. It didn't look like the America their propaganda had warned them about, a land of greedy, heartless men. Inside those trucks, disbelief spread faster than fear. They weren't being beaten. They weren't even being shouted at. The soldiers at the checkpoint nodded to them, almost respectfully. By the time the convoy reached the camp gates, one thought echoed in every mind. This can't be real. The gates swung open, not iron bars or barbed wire, like in Europe, but wooden fences, guard towers, and a sign that read, "Prisoner of War Camp, Texas." The air was dry, warm, and smelled of dust and hay. Beyond the gates, they could see ranch-style buildings, stables, even gardens. They stepped down from the trucks, squinting against the sun. The Americans waited, not with rifles aimed, but with clipboards, water, and instructions. One guard said softly, "You're safe here, follow me." For a moment, no one moved, because for the first time in years, someone had said those words, "You're safe," and that's when it hit them. Everything they'd been told, about the enemy, about hatred, about revenge, was about to be tested. The truck stopped. The gates closed behind them with a dull, metallic sound. But there was no shouting, no beating, no chaos. Only orders, calm, short, and strangely polite. Line up. Take your belongings. Move this way. The women followed, silent and tense. Their eyes darted from one guard to another, trying to read the faces behind the American uniforms. Back in Europe, showers had meant something else, something terrifying. Rumors had spread, whispers of gas, death, betrayal. So when one guard said, "You'll get a shower before your inspection," a chill ran down their spines. They froze. Hands trembled. A few looked at each other, silently asking the same question. Is this how it ends? But then, something unexpected happened. The guards didn't shout. They didn't force anyone. They simply handed out small bars of soap and clean towels. Real soap. Not the fake, gritty kind used in the camps of Europe. This one smelled faintly of lavender and something new. The first woman stepped forward hesitantly. She clutched her towel tightly, her breath shaky. Inside the washroom, she waited for the door to lock behind her, but it didn't. Instead, the guard outside called out, "Take your time. There's hot water." Hot water. That phrase sounded unreal. She turned the handle slowly. A hiss, a rumble, and then warmth. Real warmth. Water poured down her back, not poison, but life. She gasped. The dirt, the fear, the years of running, all melting off her skin. She pressed her hand against the tile, feeling the water mix with her tears. It wasn't just about being clean. It was about being human again. Outside, the line waited quietly. No one spoke. They listened to the sound of running water, the first laughter echoing faintly through the room. When the next woman came out, she looked different. Her hair was wet, her face flushed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's real," she whispered. "Warm water. Real soap." For a moment, the others didn't believe her. Then one by one, they went in. And one by one, something inside them began to change. Some cried under the water, shoulders shaking. Others stood still, too numb to feel anything. A few even laughed, quietly, awkwardly, like people who had forgotten what laughter felt like. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall of fear they had carried across the ocean. One woman, her name was Lotta, later wrote in her diary, "We were told they would destroy us. Instead, they washed the war off us." When they came out, they were given clean uniforms, plain khaki dresses, neatly folded. A guard pointed toward a mirror on the wall. Some looked at their reflection for the first time in years. The faces staring back weren't prisoners anymore, not quite. They were tired, fragile, but alive. Then came lunch. Another shock. Long tables, food trays, steaming coffee, bread. No shouting, no ration cards, no humiliation. The guards sat nearby, eating the same food. One of them even smiled and said, "Eat, you'll feel better." They didn't understand it. Why were they being treated like this? Where was the revenge they had been warned about? Where were the punishments for the war they had lost? As the afternoon sun slanted through the camp windows, a strange calm settled in. A few of the women stepped outside, walking barefoot on the dusty Texas ground. The air smelled of hay and pine. A horse neighed somewhere in the distance. For a fleeting second, it didn't feel like captivity. It felt like recovery. That night, the barracks were quiet. No sirens, no bombs, no fear of footsteps in the dark, just the soft sound of breathing and the wind brushing against the wooden walls. One woman whispered to her bunkmate, "Do you think it's a trick?" The other shook her head. "If it is," she said softly, "it's the kindest trick I've ever seen." That first day changed everything. The guards didn't realize it, but to the women, it was a kind of rebirth. They had expected to be broken. Instead, they were shown mercy. And mercy, after so much hate, was the most powerful weapon of all. Because in that simple act, a shower, a towel, a meal, the war they had carried inside began to fade. Not completely, not instantly, but the healing had started. And as the lights dimmed that night, a thought lingered in every heart. If this is what the enemy is like, then maybe the world isn't as cruel as we were told. Days passed, and fear began to lose its grip. The women woke each morning to the sound of a bell, not an alarm, not shouting, just a soft clang echoing through the Texas air. They lined up, ate breakfast, eggs, bread, and hot coffee. And then, for the first time since the war began, they were given choices. The camp commandant announced it simply. You can work on local farms, help with cooking, or join the ranch crews. You'll earn scrip, camp money. You can spend it at the canteen. At first, no one believed him. Work, pay, for prisoners? It sounded like a cruel joke, but it wasn't. Within days, the trucks rolled out, heading toward fields that stretched endlessly beneath the Texas sun. Cotton fields, cattle ranches, orchards heavy with fruit. The prisoners, now workers, stepped out wearing broad hats to shade their faces. The land was vast, quiet, nothing like war-torn Europe. One woman, Ingrid, was assigned to a cotton farm. The first time she held a cotton boll in her hands, she stared at it in wonder. It was soft, light, harmless, not like the things she used to hold in wartime. The farmer's wife handed her a jug of water and said, "You'll get used to the heat, honey." The word honey lingered in Ingrid's mind all day. She hadn't heard kindness in a stranger's voice for years. Others worked on ranches, helping mend fences, cook for the hands, or care for the horses. The Americans didn't treat them as enemies. They treated them as neighbors. And then came the horses. The women were terrified at first. Large, powerful animals they had never been near before. But the cowboys laughed softly, saying, "You can't fear something you don't know. Come on, I'll show you." One afternoon, under the blazing sun, a young German woman climbed onto a horse for the first time. Her hands shook, her heart raced, but the cowboy beside her held the reins gently, guiding her forward. The horse moved slowly, one step, then another. She let out a nervous laugh. The others clapped and cheered. For a moment, it wasn't a prisoner and a guard. It was two people sharing a lesson, a moment of trust. From that day, the cowboys started calling them the girls instead of the Germans. The line between captor and captive blurred a little more with each passing day. In the evenings, when work was done, music drifted through the camp. Western swing on the radio, laughter echoing between the barracks. Some nights, an American soldier would bring his guitar, strumming softly under the stars. And though they couldn't understand all the words, the melody, the warmth of it, reached them. It reminded them of songs from home. They began learning English, not from textbooks but from conversation. Simple words first. Thank you. Good morning. Coffee, please. And soon they were teasing, joking, laughing in a language that wasn't theirs, but somehow didn't feel foreign anymore. At the camp canteen, they used their scrip, small paper notes printed for prisoners of war, to buy tiny luxuries, soap, postcards, even candy. One woman saved her scrip for weeks to buy lipstick. When she wore it, the others cheered. It was a small thing, a single colour on a grey canvas, but it meant something powerful, a return to self. There were still fences, of course, still rules, but even those began to feel softer. The guards didn't shout, they talked. Sometimes they even helped write letters to families back in Germany, and in those letters, the women wrote things their loved ones could hardly believe. The Americans treat us well. We work, we laugh, we ride horses. It's strange. I think they've forgiven us. One woman wrote, "Every morning I expect hatred. Every evening I find respect." By late summer, something extraordinary had happened. Local Texans began to trust the German women too. Farmers invited them to Sunday meals. Children waved at the trucks as they passed. A few brave locals even said, "They're just like us, only speaking different." And maybe that was the truth, because under the same sun, sweating in the same fields, humanity had quietly replaced hostility. Of course, there were still moments of sadness, when news from home arrived, when someone remembered the past too, vividly. But here, in this unlikely corner of Texas, they discovered something war had stolen: dignity. As the months turned into seasons, the camp stopped feeling like a prison. It became something else. A strange, gentle middle ground between punishment and redemption. When asked later what it was like, one woman said, "It felt like learning how to live again." And that's exactly what it was. Because in the cotton fields, on horseback, under the endless American sky, they weren't just surviving, they were healing. And each sunrise in that dusty Texas camp carried the same quiet message. You came here as prisoners, but you might leave as people again. By now, months had passed. The Texas sun had bleached the camp fences, softened the fear, and brought colour back to faces that once looked ghostly. Laughter was no longer rare. The women rode horses, baked bread, learned English songs, and even helped local farmers with harvests. But peace, true peace, didn't come easily, not for everyone. Some women still couldn't let go of what they had been taught. They had grown up believing that the world outside Germany was cruel, barbaric, full of enemies waiting to destroy them. And now those same enemies were teaching them to ride, sharing food, calling them by name. It didn't make sense. One woman, Elsa, refused to smile at the guards. She kept her distance, folded her arms, and muttered, "It's a trick. They're softening us for something. Don't trust them." Every act of kindness felt like a trap to her. When an American soldier offered her an apple, she turned away. When another helped her fix her broken sandal, she didn't say thank you. She couldn't. Because to accept kindness from the enemy, that was betrayal. Betrayal of everything she had been raised to believe. But others saw it differently. They started to question the stories they had been fed. The propaganda, the hatred, the fear. One afternoon, while washing clothes near the camp fence, a young woman named Clara whispered, "If this is what defeat looks like, maybe we were wrong all along." The women around her froze. It was dangerous even to think that, to admit that the picture painted by their leaders might have been a lie. But Clara's words hung in the air, soft yet heavy, because deep down they all felt it. Every small act of decency, every smile, every meal, every quiet conversation was rewriting something inside them. At night, lying in their bunks, they whispered to each other, "Did you see how he helped Marta when she fell off the horse? He didn't even laugh. He helped her up. They say Americans don't hate us. Maybe that's true, but not everyone was ready to believe." Elsa snapped back. "They're pretending. The moment we forget who they are, we'll regret it." The room fell silent, because no one could argue, and no one could agree. It wasn't just a debate, it was a war of the heart. The last one left to fight. Days turned into weeks. The women who worked outside the camp came back with stories. Strange, almost unbelievable ones. "Mrs. Parker gave me bread today. She said it's from her own oven. The rancher's son lent me a book, English poetry. They let us see the Christmas decorations in town. For those who still clung to old beliefs, it was unbearable." "How can you laugh with them?" Elsa shouted one night. "They killed our brothers. They destroyed our country." Clara looked at her, eyes calm, voice steady. "And what did we do to theirs?" The words cut through the silence like glass. No one answered. No one needed to. Because for the first time they weren't thinking as Germans or prisoners, but as people. And that realization hurt more than any punishment could. The real war, it turned out, wasn't outside anymore. It was inside, in their conscience, in their memories, in the quiet spaces between guilt and forgiveness. One Sunday, after work, in the cotton fields, a small group of women sat beneath a tree watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange, fading to purple, and the air was still. Nearby, an American soldier whistled softly while feeding the horses. "He's not so different," one woman said quietly. "He misses home too," another nodded. "I used to think they were monsters," she whispered. "Now I think, maybe we just never knew them." And that was the moment something inside shifted, quietly, permanently. The idea of enemy began to lose its shape. It became blurry, human. Because when you share water, bread, laughter, it's hard to keep hating the hand that offers it. Elsa still struggled. She couldn't forgive so easily. But even she began to soften. Little by little. One morning, she saw a young American guard struggling to fix a broken fence post. Without thinking, she picked up a hammer and held it out to him. Their hands brushed. He smiled. She hesitated. And then, for the first time, smiled back. It was small, almost nothing, but it was the end of something, and the beginning of something else. That night, as the camp lights flickered out, the women lay awake, not in fear, but in reflection. Who were they now? Prisoners, workers, survivors, or something in between? They didn't have an answer, but one truth had become clear. Sometimes the hardest battle is not against another nation, but against the hate you were taught to believe. And for these women, far from home, under foreign stars, that battle, the war inside, was finally beginning to end. 4 months later, when the time came to return home, the women packed their few belongings, but their hearts were heavier than their bags. At the gate, Anna, one of the prisoners, left behind a small diary. Inside, she had written, "We came here as enemies. We leave as students of humanity. They conquered us, not with guns, but with grace." As the trucks rolled away, the camp faded behind them. But what they carried was something far greater than defeat. It was proof that even in war's shadow, compassion could still win. This story reminds us that sometimes true victory doesn't come from war, it comes from mercy. If you believe humanity is stronger than hate, share this story, subscribe my channel, and keep history alive.